At the start of the beer mile, in the shadow of the Shard and a short walk from London Bridge, sits Southwark Brewing Company. Established in 2014, Southwark blends modern recipes and ingredients with traditional brewing and a focus on cask ales, serving beer from their own tap room as well as via pubs all across London. In December 2023, I brewed a beer with them. This video is the story of that beer, Nelson's Gold. So, one of my prizes for a second in Best of Show at the Lab Open last year was a brew day with Southwark. We weren't able to rebrew the winning beer, as it was a lager, so instead I converted a New Zealand Pils recipe to a golden ale and sent it off to Connor the head brewer to scale up to a full batch. The recipe used extra pale malt with a dash of carrot pils and Munich for a clean, crisp base and featured Nelson Sauvin and Wakatu hops for a fruity, modern take on a traditional golden ale. You can see the full homebrew scale recipe via the link in the description. Connor was in the brew house a while before I arrived and had the mash well underway by 8:30am. Sadly, I didn't get to wield a mash paddle in anger for this one. We would be brewing a 1500 litre batch, which would hopefully yield about 37 casks worth of beer. While we waited for the mash, I pottered about and tried to get my head round how much stuff was crammed into the archway that houses Southwark. There were a few jobs to do in the meantime. I got to watch Connor having an argument with his labelling machine and learn some of the finer points of cask washing from Sam, the assistant brewer. All part of the glamour of professional brewing. Soon enough, it was time to drain the mash tun and start the sparge. I smiled and nodded while Connor and Sam directed me like a child pinning the tail on a donkey towards various valves and switches, for which I had very little understanding. Luckily, I avoided opening the wrong one and having a shower in hot work, which would probably have spoilt the day a bit. While we waited for the work to transfer, there were more cleaning and other jobs to do, which I studiously avoided by mincing around with my camera and making a show of collecting essential footage for this video. Eventually, they did persuade me to climb a ladder when it was time to get some hops in the boil. Evidently, I didn't cock this up too badly as I was still allowed to do this for all the remaining hop additions. The deep facial cleanse from being steamed with work was an unexpected benefit of this task. Once the boil was complete, we set the kettle up to whirlpool and added more Nelson and Wakatu for the final hot side addition. It was noticeable throughout the day how much longer it took for transfers and cooling with the larger volumes. The whirlpool hops, for example, probably spent the best part of an hour in contact with the hop work. This did make me worry a little bit about the amount of bitterness it might add compared to my expectations. In the meantime, I was finally pinned down to do some proper graft and got stuck into digging out the mash tun. All the spent grain was being collected by a farmer later that day to reuse as feed, which was good to know. Once we began the transfer into the FB, it was time to get up an even bigger ladder and pitch some yeast, in this case US-05. Luckily, my camera didn't follow it in, despite a slightly precarious filming position. All I had to do then was to get the tank labelled and try and avoid too much involvement in cleaning up. We then set about clearing the front of the brewery ready for opening the tap room, which involved shifting a lot of casks back into storage. Finally, it was time for some post-brewing refreshments. Clearly, it was important that I helped with the QC on all the lines being served that evening. The brown ale was a surprise highlight for me, and I also enjoyed the LPA and Harvard beers that were on cask and keg respectively. Sam was definitely right that the brown ale was much better through the sparkler, but he is a Yorkshireman after all. Once I reached a point of advanced refreshment, it was time to stumble back to the station and find my way home. It would be a bit longer than usual to turn the beer around due to the Christmas break, but it was due for packaging early January and tapping later in the month, which I was very much looking forward to. Finally, about a month later, I returned to the scene of the crime to sample the end product. I'd already been pleased to hear some positive feedback from Connor, and it was amazing to get behind the bar and pull a pint of Nelson's Gold for myself. From all accounts, the beer had been going down well with punters and had already been shipped out to numerous pubs as well. For me, the beer came out really well, with a crisp, clean finish and some subtle fruity notes from the hops. It was a bit more bitter than I would have expected brewing the recipe at home, but actually this lent a nice drinkability to it and it wasn't harsh in any way. It was very refreshing and easy drinking, and I made sure I dispatched several that evening just to make sure. Brewing one of my recipes commercially with Southwark was a great experience, and I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Connor, Sam and the owner Peter for hosting me at the brewery. So next time you're near London Bridge, make sure you drop into Southwark Brewing to sample some of their great beers. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to hit the like button, subscribe, drop a comment in, and you can also follow me on my socials at the links below. Cheers everyone.